Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
Today we're tackling a topic that's kind of a big deal. It's one of those things you hear thrown around all the time, but it's actually pretty complex when you get down to it, and it's especially important for those of you gearing up for those UPSC exams,
Right.
especially if international relations is your focus.
Yeah, international relations can't ignore this one.
We're talking about capitalism.
Ah, yes, the big C.
But here's the twist. There isn't just one type of capitalism.
Nope, not at all.
Well,
It's more like a family with some very different siblings.
oh, I like that analogy.
Each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and,
Quirks.
yeah, quirks, you could say.
And understanding these variations is crucial for anyone who wants to really grasp how the world works.
Absolutely, whether you're prepping for that exam or just curious about global affairs in general.
Exactly. So to guide us through this fascinating landscape, we're diving into an excerpt that breaks down these different types of capitalism. I have a feeling we're in for some serious aha moments along the way.
Oh, definitely. I think this is going to be one of those deep dives that really makes you see the world in a new light.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, so the source kicks off by setting the stage.
Okay.
It talks about how economic systems, and especially that clash between capitalism and socialism, have dominated political debate for ages.
Yeah, it's been a constant theme throughout modern history.
Right, like the battle of the ideologies.
Exactly. And it's interesting how the collapse of communism in the late 20th century led many to believe that while capitalism had won the ultimate victory,
Like that was it, end of story? Capitalism reigns supreme?
yeah, it was like a decisive knockout in the ideological boxing match.
Right, suddenly the market-private property competition
The holy trinity of capitalism.
were seen as the only viable path to creating wealth.
The one true way.
And capitalism, well, it started to spread across the globe like wildfire.
Globalization on steroids.
But here's the thing, and this is where it gets interesting. The source argues that winning that battle didn't actually settle the debate about capitalism itself.
That's a good point. It's like everyone agreed on the main course, but then started arguing about the side dishes and the dessert.
Okay, yeah, that's a perfect analogy, because as we'll see, there are many ways to do capitalism.
Many flavors, many interpretations.
But before we get to those variations, I think it's important to make sure we're all on the same page about the basics.
Yeah, good idea.
What are the fundamental principles, the core ingredients that make capitalism tick?
Right. Let's define our terms here.
It can get confusing when everyone's throwing around terms like free markets, invisible hands.
Oh, yeah, all that jargon.
So let's break it down.
Okay, well, at its core, capitalism relies on this idea of the market mechanism.
The market mechanism.
It's all about supply and demand, dictating prices, and determining what gets produced.
Like a giant invisible auction house.
Sort of. And then you have private property,
Private property.
meaning individuals and companies can own and control things like factories, land resources, all that good stuff.
Okay, so they get to decide what happens with their stuff.
Yeah, within the framework of the law, of course.
Right, of course.
And finally, there's competition.
The fuel of capitalism.
Yeah, businesses battling it out for market share,
May the best business win.
which in theory is supposed to drive innovation and keep prices in check for consumers.
Okay, so it's like this delicate balance between individual ambition and the collective good.
That's the idea anyway.
But I'm guessing it doesn't always work out so neatly in practice, right?
You got it. History is full of examples where this recipe went a bit, well, sour.
Like when greed takes over.
Yeah, exactly. Or when those market forces aren't regulated properly and things get out of whack.
Okay, so it sounds like capitalism is more like a delicate dance than a simple recipe.
Precisely, the source emphasizes that the outcomes of this recipe vary depending on how these ingredients are combined and which ones are emphasized.
So it's not just the ingredients themselves, but how you use them.
Exactly, and that's where the different types of capitalism come in.
Okay, so the source focuses on three main types, and the first one is enterprise capitalism.
Yeah, yes, the classic model.
The one that often comes to mind when we hear the word capitalism.
Right, especially in the US and the UK.
You could say it's the poster child for free market economics.
Yeah, the source even quotes Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism,
Oh, right, Adam Smith.
to illustrate the core principle of enterprise capitalism,
And what was that again?
the invisible hand of the market.
Wait, remind me about that invisible hand thing again.
Sure. So Smith argued that individuals pursuing their own self-interest in a free market would ultimately benefit society as a whole.
Like they're guided by some unseen force.
Exactly, as if an invisible hand guides them to make choices that, while driven by profit, end up promoting economic well-being for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in this model, businesses are all about maximizing profits, productivity is key, and they need a flexible workforce to adapt to those changing markets.
Exactly. You need to be able to adjust on the fly in the fast-paced world of enterprise capitalism.
And you'll often see a weaker role for trade unions in this model, right?
Yeah, they're sometimes perceived as obstacles to maximizing profit and maintaining that flexibility.
Right, because they might push for things like higher wages or better working conditions.
Exactly, which
Okay.
can cut into those profit margins.
The source also points out that financial institutions play a big role in shaping this model.
Oh, absolutely.
Since they own a lot of the wealth, they push for policies that prioritize growth and enterprise.
Hoping for a nice return on their investments.
Makes sense. And there's no denying that enterprise capitalism has achieved impressive results,
Oh, yeah, just look at the economic power of the United States.
especially in the 20th century.
A testament to the dynamism of this model.
And I think this is crucial for understanding global dynamics today. The source doesn't shy away from the downsides either.
Right. It's important to acknowledge both sides of the coin.
It highlights those issues of income inequality and social fragmentation that often come with this model.
Yeah, the gap between the rich and the poor, the erosion of the middle class.
It's a real concern.
Yes, it's crucial to acknowledge that you can have tremendous wealth creation alongside persistent poverty.
But we see that playing out in countries like the U.S., right?
Exactly, which despite its economic strength has higher poverty rates than many European
It's a
nations.
fascinating paradox.
A tale of two economies, you could say.
And definitely something those UPSC aspirants should keep in mind when analyzing different countries' economic and social landscapes.
Absolutely. Understanding these nuances is key to grasping the complexities of international relations.
Now, before we jump into the other types of capitalism, I'm curious about the historical roots of this system.
Yeah, me too.
How did capitalism go from a few shoots in 17th and 18th century Europe to this global economic force that shapes our lives today?
It's quite a journey, actually.
It's like a little acorn turning into a mighty oak tree.
That's a great analogy.
So how did that transformation happen?
Well, that's a journey worth exploring. We'll trace those roots from early commercial agriculture to the transformative Industrial Revolution, which really kicked capitalism into high gear. So, when you think about capitalism, you probably picture those giant factories, smoky cities.
Yeah, like the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. But the source actually points to a much earlier starting point.
Really?
Commercial agriculture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even before the Industrial Revolution, there were seeds of capitalism being sown in the fields.
Precisely. Think of it as farming, but with a profit-driven mindset.
Okay, so instead of just growing enough to feed their families or their local lord?
Right. They started producing crops specifically for the market, aiming to sell their surplus and make a profit.
I see. So it's like a shift from subsistence farming to market-oriented agriculture.
Exactly. And this new approach, combined with innovations in farming techniques and technologies, led to what's often called the agricultural revolution.
The agricultural revolution.
Yeah, suddenly farmers were producing more food than ever before.
And that surplus food meant that not everyone had to be a farmer anymore, right?
That's right. It freed up people to specialize in other areas like crafts trade or early manufacturing.
Okay, so more food leads to more specialization, which leads to more trade and the development of early markets.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect.
I like it.
And this sets the stage for the Industrial Revolution, which really throws gasoline on the capitalist fire.
Okay, so let's talk about that Industrial Revolution. I know it's a huge topic, but how does it fit into the story of capitalism?
Well, it's the game changer. Think about it. Mechanized production factories springing up like mushrooms, a division of labor that makes production incredibly efficient.
Yeah, it's like hitting the fast forward button on economic growth.
Precisely. And let's not forget the massive migration of people from rural areas to those booming factory towns.
Right, entire cities were built around industries like textiles and steel.
It must have felt like a whole new world was being created.
It was a period of radical transformation.
Absolutely. The source emphasizes how industrial capitalism didn't just change economies, it completely reshaped societies.
And it supercharged global trade and interconnectedness.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Right?
Yeah.
You can see how this is all relevant for UPSC aspirants. We're talking about major shifts in power, the rise of new economic forces, and the beginnings of the globalized world we live in today.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this wasn't just about European countries getting richer.
Right.
Industrial capitalism had a profound impact on the rest of the world, too.
So it wasn't just a European phenomenon.
Nope, not at all. European capital started flowing overseas. Colonies were exploited for their resources and cheap labor. And we see the emergence of a global division of labor.
With different regions specializing in different types of production?
Exactly. The seeds of globalization were sown during this era.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good grasp on enterprise capitalism and how historical forces like the Industrial Revolution shaped its development. But I remember you mentioned that there are other flavors of capitalism, right? Ones that maybe don't fit that classic American model.
Yes, the source highlights two other types, social capitalism and state capitalism.
Okay, so we're moving beyond the American dream.
Exactly. And while we won't go into a deep dive on them today, they offer some fascinating alternative ways to structure a capitalist system.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Can you just give us a taste of what those models look like?
Yeah.
What are the key differences between them and enterprise capitalism?
Certainly think of social capitalism as enterprise capitalism, but with a greater emphasis on social well-being and a more equitable distribution of wealth.
Okay, so it's still market-driven, but with a stronger focus on things like social safety nets, worker protections, and reducing income inequality.
Precisely. Many European countries, especially in Scandinavia, are often cited as examples of social capitalism in action.
So they're trying to find a balance between economic dynamism and social responsibility.
Exactly. They have robust welfare states, strong labor unions, and a greater focus on social cohesion.
Interesting. But what about state capitalism? What sets it apart? That name almost sounds like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But state capitalism is a fascinating model because it challenges the traditional notion that a strong state and a capitalist economy are incompatible.
Okay, so how does that work?
In the system, the state plays a very active role in the economy, often owning and controlling key industries, while still operating within a market framework.
So it's not just about regulating the market from the outside.
Nope.
It's about the state being a major player in the market itself.
Exactly, and China is often cited as a prime example of state capitalism.
Okay, so while it has embraced market reforms and private enterprise,
Right.
the state still retains a significant degree of control over key sectors of the economy.
And exerts influence over market dynamics.
So we've got these three distinct models of capitalism, enterprise capitalism, which prioritizes free markets and limited government intervention, social capitalism, which balances market forces with social welfare, and state capitalism, where the state plays a leading role in the economy.
That's a great summary.
I can already see how understanding these different models is crucial for anyone trying to make sense of global politics and economics.
Absolutely. It's like having a new set of lenses to view the world through.
It helps explain why some countries prioritize economic growth above all else, while others place greater emphasis on social equality or national control over strategic industries.
Exactly. It's all about understanding those different priorities and how they shape a country's behavior on the global stage.
It's like each country is playing the same game of capitalism,
Right.
but they're using different rule books.
Exactly, which makes the game a lot more complex and unpredictable.
No wonder international relations can be so complex. But this is exactly the kind of nuanced understanding that UPSC examiners are looking for, right?
Absolutely. They want to see that you can go beyond simplistic explanations and grapple with the complexities of the global system.
And recognizing these different forms of capitalism is a great step in that direction.
It's a key piece of the puzzle.
Now, I know we're running out of time, but before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something that's been swirling around in my head.
Okay.
If capitalism has already evolved so much over the centuries, what might the future hold for this system?
That's a great question, and it's one that economists and political scientists are grappling with right now.
So we don't have all the answers.
Not even close.
Could we see entirely new hybrid forms of capitalism emerge, perhaps blending elements of the models we've discussed today?
It's definitely possible. We're already seeing some blurring of the lines between these models.
Or could we see a shift away from capitalism altogether towards something entirely different?
Now, that's a big question and one that's hard to predict.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads.
Yeah, and the path we choose will have profound implications for the future of humanity.
Okay, now those are some thought-provoking questions.
Oh.
And I'm sure our listeners have plenty of their own thoughts and questions bubbling up after this deep dive.
I hope so.
But before we sign off, I want to make sure we hit those key takeaways one more time. What are the big things we want everyone to remember about capitalism?
All right, let's recap. Well, the first thing to remember is that capitalism isn't this monolithic thing,
Right. It's not one size fits all.
Exactly. It's got different flavors, each with its own recipe and its own set of consequences.
Like a buffet of capitalist models.
Exactly. And we explored enterprise capitalism, that classic free market model where the government takes a back seat and lets the invisible hand do its thing.
Right, minimal government intervention, maximum individual freedom.
Yeah, that's the idea. And we saw how this approach, often associated with the US, can generate a ton of wealth, but also lead to some pretty stark inequalities.
The good and the bad, the yin and the yang of enterprise capitalism.
And for those of you prepping for the UPSC, this is where you can start connecting the dots to things like development economics, international trade, even foreign policy.
Because different capitalist models can lead to very different approaches on the global stage.
Absolutely. Think about it. A country that embraces state capitalism might be more likely to engage in protectionist trade policies.
While a country that leans towards social capitalism might prioritize international cooperation and aid.
Exactly. Those different models shape a country's worldview and its interactions with other nations.
Okay, so model matters.
Model matters big time.
We also dug into the historical roots of capitalism, how it wasn't just some sudden explosion.
Right. It was a gradual evolution.
Starting with those early market-oriented farmers, and then getting a massive boost from the Industrial Revolution.
And that revolution wasn't just about fancy new machines. It completely reshaped societies, sparked urbanization, and really laid the foundation for the interconnected global economy we have today.
It's like the Industrial Revolution was the launch pad for modern capitalism.
Yeah, it catapulted us into a whole new era.
And then just when we thought we had capitalism figured out, you blew our minds with those alternative models.
Oh, yeah.
Social capitalism and state capitalism.
It's like discovering a whole hidden world of economic possibilities.
It's like capitalism has a secret menu.
Yeah, and it really highlights the diversity of human approaches to organizing autonomies.
And studying these alternative models can help you analyze a wider range of countries and their positions in the global system.
Absolutely. It gives you a more nuanced understanding of how different parts of the world operate.
So for all those future diplomats and global affairs enthusiasts out there, remember, don't just memorize definitions.
Right.
Think critically about the different flavors of capitalism, their strengths and weaknesses, and how they shape global interactions.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for understanding international relations.
I love that analogy.
And don't forget the historical context. Understanding how capitalism evolved can give you insights into why certain countries adopted certain models and how those choices continue to shape their trajectories today.
Okay, so history matters too.
History always matters.
This deep dive has been a wild ride, and I have a feeling it sparked a ton of new questions for our listeners.
Me too.
So what are your thoughts? What stood out to you in this exploration of capitalism? We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely share your reflections, your aha moments, or even your disagreements with us.
That's what makes these deep dives so engaging. It's a conversation, not just a lecture.
Exactly. We're all learning together.
And if you enjoyed this journey into the heart of capitalism, hit that subscribe button and join us for more fascinating deep dives into the world of knowledge.
We've got plenty more to explore.
We'll be back soon with another thought-provoking topic. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.